exhibiting an award-winning sound-based visual artist whose work is driven by the fundamental principle that sound is energy made physical, and the Chinese usage of acoustics in feng shui to energize space. Over the past 2+ decades, she has researched and created work based on the sounds hidden in the iron of the Eiffel Tower, contained by NASA's vertical guns chamber, whose projectiles shoot at Mach 15, or produced by our brains. Her current work is based on her discovery of the acoustics contained in Saturn's rings for NASA. With these sounds, she shapes inspirational installations and environments. In the beginning of her career, she was interested in both sound and the basic concepts of sculpture. In considering them together, she realized that sound was a sculptural form that filled a space. Thus, she defined the internal architectural space as its own shape delineated by sonics. Using this as a jumping off point, she has claimed an acoustic terrain based on sampling our sonic environments to discover what we don't hear in our world and forming installations with the unheard. She has worked extensively in collaboration with Dr. Seth S. Horowitz, neuroscientist, space scientist, and author of The Universal Sense, How Hearing Shapes the Mind, and renowned composer of the T-Mobile ringtone, Lance L. Massey. As a team, they have discovered that innovation occurs by working together. Okay, so we're gonna do an interview. I'm gonna interview her. She's a very interesting person, I can tell you that. So the first question is, what was your journey when you were young?
Well, Alex, first I want to thank you so much for inviting me. And I hope you can see me clearly, because on my picture, the image is kind of faded and fuzzy. Can you see me clearly?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. I was struggling with technology. Thank you so much for inviting me. And you know, I wanted to say that I also have some images to show you, and I wanted to share my screen. Share my screen. There we go. Share screen. I need to be able. The host has to enable me to share the screen.
And that should be done now.
Okay. So then, let's see how we go. How this goes.
At the top, you should see the advanced section, and you can then select the share area of screen as we were talking about before.
Oh, I see. And hold on a second, folks. There it is. Aha. Well, technology, you know, it's got to catch up, you know.
You're doing great.
I don't know what, are you seeing this slide? There, that must be the whole slide. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, finally. I worked hard to get these slides together for you. And my friend Ed Rubin is saying that I'm coming out a little bit fuzzy, but I can't improve on that. So I'm sorry about that, Ed. On my side, my image is very fuzzy, but getting back to my work, you know, growing up, I was surrounded by artists. My parents are artists, and their friends are artists, and their neighbors were all artists. And so even my earliest memories are from when I was very young. My parents were my parents had an interracial marriage, and that relationship was enabled by their two closest friends who lived next door, and they were silk screen printers. And so at the age of like 5 or 6, I learned silk screen making. So that began my foray into into art. And I would do have to say, for those people that don't know about silkscreen printing, is that that was the way to make colored prints before we had Xerox machines. So this is a long time ago. So what my parents did with it was they sent out birth announcements, for example. My birth announcement was a silk screen print. Christmas cards were always made as silk screens, and various other usages like artistic usages. And it's still used today in the art industry. You can see a picture on the lower left, this image right here. It shows a silk screen being used to make a print. But later on, my parents decided that I needed to have a more rounded life experience. And so they sent me to this community, I guess, event space called Studio One in Oakland, California. And it was just opening about the time that I started going to school there on the weekends, on Saturdays. And there I was introduced to drawing, painting, jewelry fabrication, sand casting, silk screen making, puppetry, all these different kinds of ways to express yourself and make stuff. And so that was the beginning of my introduction to the arts. And what I guess was so important was that this began when I was a child, and it was the basis of the foundation of my life experience, because I was surrounded by it all the day, all the time, whether it was at home or in the studio or with friends.
Nice. So we're wondering, what is the meaning of your name?
You know, Alex, so many people are curious about that. Yeah, China blue is actually a color. And it was created by the Chinese, and it was derived by a mineral called lapis lazuli. And you can see there's a Pantone color swatch right here in the middle. And it's only recently that Pantone actually recognized China blue as a color for some reason. I don't understand why, but there you have it. Because in the 17th century, the Dutch became aware from the Chinese exports, the Dutch became aware of this beautiful blue color that they had no access to. And so, and the Chinese had control over how to make it. So the Dutch decided to fabricate their own, and they came up with Delftware. And a lot of people are familiar with what's on the right-hand side, an image of a Dutch Delftware piece. And you can see, in comparison to the one on the left, the Chinese blue and white pottery, how similar the colors are, but how different stylistically they are. The Dutch are trying to mimic the style, but it's a Dutch version. So that's the story of China blue.
Okay.
It's both a color and an international color.
Okay. So what is the background that you have?
Okay. My father's Chinese, my mother is Swiss. Actually, my father is Canadian Chinese. My mother is Swiss, and I was raised in California. So this kind of multicultural slam was normal for me. On my father's side, when I would visit his sisters or his brothers, we would hang out and play mahjong, and I would hear them speak in Chinese, and we would eat homemade Chinese food. And when I went to my mother's family's house, there were Swiss travel posters all over the place, like you see on the right-hand side.
Cool.
Traditional Swiss outfits hanging on the wall, a crossbow. You know, of course, everybody would have a crossbow. And these were sort of little bits of Switzerland that they brought to the United States with them. But then I was raised on the at the base of the UC Berkeley campus. So I was surrounded with very, very educated, interesting, multiracial and multi-educated people, both people my age as well as adults. So it made for a really a fun and exciting and vibrant environment.
All right. So what led you to become an independent learner?
Okay. And for our dear friends that want me to jump forward to astronomy and the space science, we'll get there. We will get there. Alex wanted to establish sort of a background of me, and the interesting thing about my background is that because I have this multi-pronged background, it gave me a capacity to look at things in a different way. And so what happened was the joy of cooking. When I was growing up, The Joy of Cooking was my go-to book to learn how to do all the things that women were expected to do at that time, which was cook. So cook well. My favorite was to bake bread. And so I learned how to bake bread from this cookbook. And first I started out with the traditional white bread, and then I went to all the different kinds of breads, whether it's American style breads or French style breads or Italian style breads. I learned how to make them, and it was great. And I also made bread weekly for my family. But what was interesting about this, when I think back to those particular times, was the fact that it taught me that I could learn and apply something from a book. I can by just following good, well-written directions, and I can apply it to my life. So I took that fast forward to in high school. I took that fast forward to my habit, which was when I was really, really bored, I would go to the UC Berkeley libraries, which are tremendous. There's so many on the UC Berkeley campus dedicated to each discipline. And I would sneak into the stacks. And at that time, it was easy to do that. There were no gates or special cards or passwords or anything like that. It was open. So I'd sneak into the stacks and pull various books off the shelves to learn about them, learn about that field. I would go to the local bookstore and find a course that was being offered at UC Berkeley and read or buy the book that was required for the course and read it. So that became a habit I developed that enabled me to teach myself electronics. You can see, like here in the lower left, a guy working out a circuit, which I've been doing. And that eventually led to learning about space science. And I'll tell you more about that very soon.
Okay, so tell me about your art and how it evolved to the work that you do today.
Well, to begin with, my artwork is about sound. And it again comes from this multifaceted view of the world. And I began with, everything evolved sort of simultaneously, actually. I didn't begin with one thing, but I studied for sculpture while I was studying feng shui, for example. And as I was looking at feng shui, I realized that one of the components in feng shui is the usage of sound. And sound is used to energize space to make it more dynamic. As you can see on the left, there's a wind chimes. It's a common component that you see in gardens and homes, and the usage of wind chimes or bells to make a space filled with sound. So that idea appealed to the sculptor in me, which is the concept of, if you are to cast something into a plaster mold, for example, what would happen is you would take molten metal and fill the mold with the metal to make the cast. And this idea of filling space with sound appealed to the sculptor in me. And so you can see in the middle image an analysis of sound as it propagates in space. And this is the scientific approach to it. And you can see that through all these lines are a visual analysis of how sound fills and reacts through space. On the right-hand side is an image of a painting that I made that illustrates this idea a little bit more fully. And there you can see it a little bit better. Yay. So that's kind of my approach to sound in a very, very simplistic way. And I like the idea that it is a fundamental.
So tell us about your installations that you've done.
So going to installations are a way of showing art. It's a relatively new form that a lot of people aren't familiar with. And the point of an installation is that it basically fills a space. It's very much like using this idea that I was talking about in terms of using sound to activate a space. As you can see on the left, there's an image of a colonnade in Venice that I was asked to design. And I filled it, you can see little tiny speakers filling the colonnade. And actually, I was invited to do this by somebody who's actually present on this call, Ed Rubin. He curated me to present this piece in Isola San Servolo in Venice. Here in the middle is a mock-up of Cassini's Dreams, which is a work that a relatively recent work that I finished for the Venice Biennale. And this is a tabletop version, which is a 3D model of Saturn on the left with a laser, actually a Cassini enabled laser. There's Cassini on the right. It's a 3D model of Cassini with a laser inside of it. And the model for the Saturn model is turning, and it mimics the idea of reading the rings of the Saturn model. And this one on the right, oh, good. Do we have image? This is what was shown at the Venice Biennale. So that gives you a little idea of what a live installation looks like.
Okay, thank you. Are there any experiences in your life that stand out as really life-changing?
Two. There are two. One was to defy my father. When I was 13, for some reason, he offered up some advice to me, which I did not ask for, but which was that I should never consider art as a career, but only as a hobby. And that was something I tried to do, but it never stuck for me. So I just gave in eventually and decided I can't live my life without being dedicated to art. But the other thing was that I met my husband, and my husband was a neuroscientist and a scientist interested in space science. Through him, I was introduced to space science, and he was working with the department at Brown University doing research projects at the vertical gun. And this is the vertical gun here on the left. This is at the Ames Research Center in California. So it was on that first trip that he took me to the vertical gun. I was just sitting around watching what they were doing with rapt excitement. And I said to the PI, just in passing, as they were setting everything up and concentrating on their work there, I said to them, gosh, I wonder what it sounds like. And he said, well, in the 50 years that this facility has been in existence, nobody has thought about its sound. And I have to go back a couple of steps because I think I left you out on the fact that the vertical gun is this big device, and you can see this red arm is a rail that shoots into the chamber here, this blue bit here. This blue chamber is about 5 feet tall, and it shoots in particles into the chamber at different angles. It's 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees. And the whole point of it is to mimic meteorite impacts to study what would happen if a meteor hit the Earth. What would happen to humans? What would happen to the nature? What would happen to our world? So that's why sound, I thought, would be really, really important to consider. So because I was the one that came up with the idea, I was allowed, although I'm not educated in the field and I'm not, I wasn't a Brown employee, I was allowed to do a number of research projects there at the Ames Research Center. So this is me setting up some equipment with an interface, and this is a with an audio interface here. And this is a meteorite impact that you would have seen as a result of particles shooting into the chamber.
Okay. Are you done telling us about the vertical gun?
Yeah, I can go on for a long time, but we can go on to setting up the equipment. Here's some more pictures of me with the data capture equipment. What was kind of interesting about this is that we had 18 audio sources, which means that all these lines here went into my audio equipment here. And the scary part about all of this was when we went to set this all up, we realized that our cables didn't fit through the hole.
Uh,
Their holes were too small. And I was fretting about it, which I often do. But the technician said, that's okay. I've always wanted to redesign the plate. Don't worry about it. So he retooled this plate here, allowed our cables to go through, wadded up some vacuum goop that goes around the cables to keep the vacuum from releasing from the chamber, and we were good to go. And this is in another, on the right hand side, this is me pointing to the launch button. I want to say I pushed it, but I wasn't allowed. Nobody's allowed to push the launch button except the launch guy. But it was exciting to actually get that close.
That's a pretty interesting story. So what is it about astronomy that really piqued your interest?
It's about sounds. It's from the very beginning, it was listening for the sounds in space. Here I'm inside the chamber on the left, and you can see there's the impact zone. And what I did was I recorded what would have been heard. So there, that little red thing by my feet is a recording device. And I scattered them around the outside of the pit, also along the wall, and there's another device here on the top, a different type of recording device. And I use these all together to capture what it would be like if you were there at that moment when the impact occurred. One of the research projects that I did was to capture the sonic wave impact that leveled the Siberian forest in Tunguska. And here we have the forest in little tiny toothpicks. And the impact, you can see the hole in the middle is where the particle hit. And the thing about this particular sonic wave event is that it leveled the whole forest. Fortunately, there were very few people that lived there, but the ones that lived there were totally frightened to tears. And it's one person theoretically lost his hearing as a result of it. And they believe one person also went crazy because he couldn't understand what could have possibly happened. Also on the right is another experiment that we did where we recorded what a person might hear during a meteorite impact on Mars. And here we have a little head, a styrofoam head, with goggles on, of course. Her eyes are protected. And then we put microphones in her ears. So it's a model of a human head and what that person might hear during a meteorite impact on Mars. So that's an overview of a few projects that we did in the past.
Nice. What is it about Saturn and Cassini that interests you?
Well, I got excited about Cassini because during Cassini's tour of Saturn, I was starting to see all these beautiful images coming out, and it was really, really hard for a person that was not well versed in space science to understand what was going on. And it took me some time to sort of wrap my mind around this spectacular event. And you can see Cassini here on the left, and then Cassini in relationship to Saturn on the right. And the thing about the Cassini tour, is that during the time it was up, it downloaded an enormous amount of data. I think it was terabytes amount of data that was constantly downloading of all the research it did about Saturn. And that was its whole goal, was to research Saturn. So, but what caught my attention was this view on the top left, which is a view from the northern, from the top of Saturn, the North Pole of Saturn, looking straight down onto the planet. And when I looked at that, I said, oh, that's an LP. That's a long playing audio album, for those people who don't know what an LP is, because we now are no longer even using CDs. So I looked at it, and you can see with an LP, there are tracks, and the black part is the space between the tracks where there's no data. And that became the launching point for my work about Cassini. And as you saw before, the exhibition at the Venice Biennale was kind of the summation of the work that I had done researching Saturn. And I guess what the most important part is that while I was researching Saturn and downloading all of its data, I wanted to find out if there was sound there. And so we created an approach to do that, to comb through all the data and see how sound could be discovered. And through a number of jumps and hoops and processes, we discovered sound in Saturn's rings. And when you think about it, it makes sense, because all that, this white bit here, all of that is ice and particles rotating really fast around Saturn. That's all stuff that's hitting each other, and each item has its own orbit, and it's floating around and smacking into other bits and pieces as it rolls around. So there's all these events that occur besides that create audio events. So we made those discoveries through that process.
That's pretty amazing that you could discover that. I'm impressed.
It was crazy.
Yeah, amazing. So how did technology become a driving force in your work?
Well, technology, it was a slow evolution. I backed into it. I had no ambition of being technically adept at all. But what happened is that, I guess with me, everything is driven by my need to make a better work of art. And it began with the EEPROM chip, which is this one on the left, which is a chip that you can record over and multiple times. So I learned how to do that because my goal was to put a sound into an object, a sculpture, and to have it played on a loop. And the only thing available at the time were audio tapes to do that. So I found that I could record my sounds on the EEPROM chip and stick it into a sculpture, and it became small enough so that it would play on its own without having to rewind it and do all those things that you have to do with audio tapes. That led me to learning how to solder, because then I needed to build my own circuits to be able to hold the EEPROM chip and to manage everything. And that led to eventually 3D printing, which is what I'm focused on right now. And this image here is something that I'm working on, which is making 3D prints of some of Saturn's moons. Now, Saturn has 84 named moons, but over 100 unnamed moons. They're still getting around to naming them all and better describing them. So I just focused on some of the smaller moons, and here you can see them in scale. And my goal is, hopefully, to be able to print them. I've gotten 2 printed. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. Once I get, the little ones are easier to make because they're tiny, and you can experiment on the size and the best methods to print them. And that's what I've been doing so that I can get my best approach to that. But as you get into a larger print, it's a little bit scary, because you can always, the print can stop midstream for no reason whatsoever. And you lose.
Wow.
And this print on the left, it's 20 and a half inches diameter. So that one, it's a risky proposition, because if something happens in the print, that would, I don't know, that would be a 3-day print or something crazy like that.
Mhm.
So if something happens in mid-print, you have to start all over again.
Wow. So cool. So I think next you were going to share with us the CD for Cassini's Dreams.
Yeah, so what I did here's Cassini's Dreams, here's the CD. And I worked with my husband, Seth Horowitz, who was an adept at mixing, and Lance Massey, who is the T-Mobile ringtone creator and composer. And we worked together, and what we did was we took the sounds that we discovered in Saturn's rings and made that into a 10 or 11 track CD. And it included all the tracks were, I guess what I have to say is that it was just an amazing process to go through all this material and to come up with tracks that capture the idea of what is going on around Saturn and with her moons and the rings, and the idea of having it done on a CD with audio and making it musically interesting was really a fascinating process. And I guess what I have to say is that it really, having all this material that Saturn downloaded for us, begged for new ways for us to explore the planet and data. And I guess that's what we tried to do. We used Doppler shifting of the radio waves to let us listen into the cold environment and the complexity of the moons. And here is some of the tracks. Here is not some of the tracks. Here is a copy of the back of the CD that shows you all the tracks and the titles of the tracks, like Cassini's Dreams there's an event that occurs around the wings called propellers and spokes, and that's how the rings change in shape based on solid objects like little baby moons that are floating around, and as the different particles surround these baby moons, they create propellers and spoke events. So we created a track based on that. The Cassini's Dreams Kamikaze Snowflakes is about the ice as it hits all the different elements within the rings and how it creates this like sort of icy effect. So that's a little bit of the overview of the tracks that we created. And I guess I'm open for questions. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
There's actually 2 questions in the chat. Judy Thomas asks if you can explain how you recorded the Saturn rings.
Hi, Judy. The process of creating the Saturn ring sounds was not a literal recording because we could not put a microphone into the rings. I mean, that Cassini they didn't give Cassini a microphone for some reason. It's only recently that they decided to put a microphone on the more recent space, more recently. But so what we did was we took the data, and there's a process of data conversion that we developed that converted the data into audio.
Okay.
That's what we did.
Okay, the next one is from Edward Rubin. He says, I'm quite curious if China watched the film Don't Look Up about a comet in a collision course with the Earth.
Yes.
What she thought about it.
Hi, Ed. Oh my gosh. I just happened to stumble across that a couple of weeks ago, and I just really had a lot of, it captured my attention. It really captured my rapt attention because it was so close to the kind of the area that I've been working in, and the idea of what would happen on Earth if a meteor might impact the Earth. And you know, it's kind of interesting because there's a whole history, actually art history of meteorites, documentation of meteorites, I should say. Like Durr, for example, was an artist who one of his drawings depicts what was called an iron rain, where there was, at that particular time, there was this bits of iron fell out of the sky. They were meteorites falling out of the sky. People were scared to death. They thought that, you know, it was a bad omen. The gods they had done something bad, and the gods were angry. So this idea of imagery and art is an interesting historical arc that I've been following that has taken me completely off the topic of the movie, I have to say. I was just realizing.
Okay, here's another question from Norman Lowry. Can you speak about your compositional process for Cassini's Dreams, moving from the sounds to the tracks?
Hi, Norman. The compositional process was, I think everything about this particular project was very complex. As I was describing before, we first had to define the sounds. And then the question was, what do we do with them? Now, they could be left as raw sounds, but I just kept on thinking that as a raw sound, it wouldn't captivate people's attentions because people have it contextualized. And that's why I looked to Lance and Seth to come up with the CD. So what we did was we came up with themes, as you can see on the tracks on this particular slide. We came up with themes for each of the tracks to be able to organize the concepts around the audio that we captured. And then it became a process of composing. And when you have three heads composing together, it's a back and forth process of, what do you think now? Trying not to step on each other's feet, but it worked out really, really well. And if you guys have a chance to hear it, I'd love to hear your opinion.
Okay, Tim Denman asked if you can play some of the sounds from the CD.
Tim, you know what? I don't have an easy way to do that at this particular moment. When I was playing you the video of here, let's go back to the video of here. This has one of the tracks from the CD. And Tim, I just wanted to add that if you go to this link, just go to Amazon or type in Cassini's Dreams, China Blue. You'll get to the CD, like here at Amazon. You'll get to the CD, and there's a way to play some of the tracks, so you can get a little preview of the other tracks.
Okay, thank you.
Might ask if you could swipe that link from your browser there and paste it in the chat so that everybody can. That's probably not going to copy it. That's just
No, that's not going to
text.
copy.
So you'll need to go to into your PowerPoint and pull that out directly.
Okay.
It's readily discoverable on Amazon.
Oh, cool.
Oh, good.
Oh, why don't you post it, Jeff?
Okay. see if I can find that page.
Sorry.
Well, okay, try that again.
I see it on the chat.
Excellent.
You got
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Emily and Steve.
Okay, so there's another question from Edward Ruman. Can we hear some of the album's music? Also, the movie Melancholia from 2011 also had the comet coming toward the Earth. The Otherworldly was frightening. Did you ever see this movie? It scared the bejesus out of me.
Well, Ed, no, I didn't see that. I didn't see those movies. And also, I think, Ed, if you go to the chat, you'll be able to get the link to the CD where you can listen in on some of the clips. I wasn't prepared to give you samples, so I don't have them readily available right now. But head on over to Amazon and I think you'll be able to listen in.
Okay, are there any more questions? Anybody? No? Okay, well, I want to thank you, China. This was so fun to do an interview with you. I really appreciate you partaking in it and answering some really interesting questions. Thank you so much.
Alex, thank you so much. Thank you so much for making this happen and being
Sure.
enthusiastic about doing an interview. I've really enjoyed it.
Good, me too.
Excellent.
Thank you, Jack.
Very, very
This was
cool.
fun. See you soon.
Yes, indeed. See you at another star party, we hope.
At the next, in a warmer star party.
Warmer
Oh.
one. Outstanding. Well, thank you very, very much. And we had a few comments about it. I just want to make a closing remark that when we post our meetings up, we do the full meeting range, which includes our business meetings. So apologies for having the 30-minute header there at the beginning. We've actually had some people suggest that we put the speaker first and the business meeting at the end. There might be some logic to that, but we do have 40 years worth of history to work that one out with. So we'll probably keep it the way it is, but excellent. Thank you very much for getting China Blue in here, Alex. And thank you, China Blue, for the talk. That was great. We stick around here for those who would like to and chat about whatever you like, if you're available. So if we were in person, we would kind of gather together in little groups and talk about stuff and go out to have a little nosh afterwards. Although that's getting hard to find these days. Bloody places don't stay open long enough.
College diners hours are showing, not college, Plaza is showing that they're open 24 hours again.
Oh, back to 24. Yay.
I have to verify that, but I saw, saw that list.
Test. Yeah.
Why don't we meet at like 11:30 tonight? And
Yeah.
I wanted to throw in one thing for China Blue there. I think she's still here, or maybe it's
Yes, I'm still here.
okay. Great. You had a picture early on about the gun that shoots imitation meteorites into the thing there. For sound, I guess, for your aspect of it, but there's an interesting thing I like to bring up to groups, especially when there are younger folks running around there, and that they also use that to, study the patterns that you get when objects hit the moon and Earth and things like that. And there was a study going on where they were trying to see what it took to get what we call rays on the moon. If you look at the moon, you'll see some craters, usually smallish craters, that have really nice rays coming out from these craters, and they're very defined and very pretty to look at. So they were scientists were trying to study this thing out, and they had that setup that you had, and you can really see it on there. It's a nice circular thing with this absolutely beautiful, you know, flat material that we're using for emulating the moon's surface. They'd fire a pellet into that thing and not get any rays. It was just circles out, you know, the material would fly out and land and they would get these rings, but they wouldn't get rays at all. And they were having a very difficult time working out why they couldn't, you know, coming to an understanding of how on the earth, how on the moon you would get these rays coming out of these impact craters. And they came across a science teacher in some grade school class, 4th or 5th grade, where the kids decided to create an experiment like this. And they took sand in a sandbox. And they just kind of put some sand in there and they took a rock and they threw the rock in and boom, it went out. Perfect rays. And they were like,
Yeah.
well, what the heck is going on? And what they found out is the scientists were making everything perfect. They had
Exactly.
absolutely uniform material in there, flattened to within a micron of its life. And they hit it and it was so smooth and conformal that it just kind of went out in perfect rings. But when the kids did it, they like threw some sand in, leveled it out, and they basically imitated exactly what the planet was, hit it with a rock, and the, you know, peaks and valleys made all the wonderful little rays out of this. The scientists were like, oh wow, we didn't think of that. 4th and 5th grade kids did.
Yeah, sometimes you can be too perfect.
Right. I saw that image and I was like, oh yeah, that's my story about the kids learning, teaching the scientists.
Jack, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Oh, thank you. Go. Yeah.